Hi, everybody. I'm Paul Feig, and you're watching the whole podcast.
Welcome to The Whole. I am Rob Sprance.
I'm Lori Levine.
We are joined by Laura Chinn from Florida Girls, a show that I absolutely love. And Laura, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here.
So I was a fan of Schitt's Creek, as most people are, and watched it religiously. And when I got to the point where I caught up, I watched it live. And I see a promo for your show, Florida Girls. And in the promo alone, it was like 30 seconds. And I was all in. I'm like, this is we do Florida Man stuff on this show all the time. We even have a Florida Man game where we read the stories and you have to guess which one was
You can't even spell Florida without Lori. Right.
People say that to me a lot. They're like, Florida. They're like, you should do a show called Florida. Yeah.
So Florida Girls debuted, and I watched it from the first one on. It's a hysterical show, and Laura plays Shelby, the main character, and it was great in it. But it was only maybe 4 episodes in that I discovered that not only are you in it, but you actually wrote and created the show.
Yeah.
So that was very impressive too. I didn't realize any of that stuff. But it's kind of, as you start to watch it, you see the names. I was like, wait a minute, isn't she the same one that plays the part? So, so it's very, very cool that that you were able to go to fruition. I know how hard that must be, to have an idea and then get it on television, period. That's incredible, and congratulations on that alone.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, no, it was definitely no small feat. It was a long process to get there, and it was a super fun experience. It was so much fun, and the actors and I became so close, and the storylines were all from my life growing up in Clearwater, Florida. So it was like this long time dream come true.
So, all right. So you basically, so you grew up there in a very similar vibe. So there.
Yeah. Very similar vibes.
Did you dress this way?
Yeah, for sure. No, I feel like we were cooler on the show than I was in real life. I definitely dressed, and I was definitely scantily clad in my Florida years. Because you have to be. People will think you're like an undercover cop if you're not in a tube top and a mini skirt. But yeah, it was every episode has a story that was taken directly from my life. And in the writing of the show, it was like just me telling stories from growing up, and the writers being like, what? That's so fucked up. Let's do that. So that was, more or less what the show was. The characters are exaggerated versions of combinations of different people. But the stories are pretty personal.
I mean, that's great to be able to dip into your own life to do it. That's where it's best. But, I noticed, like, some of my favorite shows, comedy or drama, the location is a character, like when it's done right, like, Breaking Bad, like, all of those type of shows, the location becomes its own character. And in Florida Girls, the underbelly of Florida becomes a character in this. But, I had to imagine because the show does have this nice balance between just absolute ridiculously mocking, but at the same time kind of paying a homage to it as well. Like you do feel for these people because they don't have any money and they do have to find their way around, and they're making the best out of their lives given their situation.
Yeah, the intention was never to be like, fuck you, Florida, because I love Florida, and I'm, from Florida, and I am these girls. So it was never, it was never supposed to be like mean or even like looking down on, but it is still a comedy, so it's like in the way that The Office makes fun of office workers, but they're not necessarily like hating office workers, like we're trying to find that blend of like, we still have to be making fun of this world, but without looking down on it. And a lot of that came from the friendships, and I had these really meaningful friendships growing up, and my group of girlfriends, all of us came from broken homes and none of us had dads, and we kind of raised each other. And that kind of heart was something that we tried to infuse the show with.
Mm-hmm. And you definitely did. And so when you start writing this, does it start, is the location and the whole Florida Girls theme part of it right away? Does that idea come first, or are you just going through your stories and trying to compile it all together? Because I'm fascinated with how that process works, where it goes from just an idea to where it actually, becomes a full story.
Yeah. Florida was always something I wanted to tell stories about, because I've written on a lot of other people's comedies, and in the writer's room, I'll tell these stories and people are like, that's so dark and we can't say that on our NBC, family show, but the stories are great, so it became this thing in rooms and on stage, doing improv at UCB in LA and stuff, where I would tell these stories and the reactions were so big, but I wanted a place to tell those stories that would allow me to tell them, and not, water them down or make them family friendly or whatever. So it was trying to find the right way into that world that could make it a show. And the thing that unlocked it was, in the pilot, there's a girl who's like moving out of Florida, which usually you'd like follow her and her adventure to New York City. And then when we found that idea to kind of turn it around and make it about the people she left behind, then it became like, okay, now we have a concept, and it's not just like Florida, but there's like this thing kind of holding it together, which is like, to everyone who's ever moved away, what are your friends up to? Or to anyone who's ever stayed in their town, what is your life like? And that's kind of what we were generating story from, and what the show became about.
And in the show, your desire to leave and better yourself is mocked incessantly. Like, how dare you try to be smart? And and you're bringing everybody down because you want to make better of yourself. But you moved to LA, so that kind of happened for real too. Like, you did have to abandon it. Did people give you a hard time? Your friends give you a hard time for wanting to do that?
I mean, they did and they didn't. Like, the hard time came from like, oh, we're going to fucking miss you, that kind of stuff. Nobody was ever like, you're a loser, you're not going to make it. Like, that wasn't the energy. But it was sad. And it does feel like abandonment, like you're leaving your tribe behind. And, I think that's true for so many people from so many different cultures, especially though when it's more low income. If you're going to college or you're going to make this big change for yourself, people can react, negatively and protectively, like they don't want you to leave, or they don't want you to say what they have isn't good enough, and that's not at all what I was even saying, but that stuff all comes up, but my friends were pretty supportive for the most part. And if anything, it just came from the sadness of the group breaking up,
Yeah. So at what point did you decide to move there? So, I want to kind of talk about some of the other things you did beforehand, because there's some cool stuff in there, especially improv and things like that I'm always fascinated with. But at what point in your life did you move there? Did you start getting parts and be like, I have to be there at this point? Or did you go there with nothing, that whole, girl with a dream story, and just go and start from scratch?
Yeah. I was girl with a dream and $2,000. I worked at a day spa in Clearwater when I was 19. I dropped out of high school, and I didn't go to like a university or anything. I dabbled in community college. But I always knew I wanted to perform. And I always wrote, but because I didn't go to college and I didn't have like an intellectual college-y type family, writing was never a career option. So acting was the thing that I was going to pursue. So I moved to LA when I was 20, with money that I had saved, and just started like waitressing and working in a spa in Beverly Hills, because I'd had this random spa background
experience.
I don't know why. So that's what I did. I just was like very poor, lived in a 2-bedroom apartment with 3 people, like had a sheet, across the room that I shared with another person. And just did it. Sent out my headshots in clear envelopes to agencies. I don't know, and just sort of started taking those steps. with acting and started auditioning for things and getting, guest stars and small roles on television shows. And yeah.
The $2,000 is enough for about a day. In like,
I know. It's crazy. And my rent was like $500 a month at the time. So because we lived in such a terrible situation. So it got me through. And then I just worked. I constantly worked and cried, just like cried on my way to one job and then cried on my way home. It was brutal. Yeah, it was brutal. And then I was doing a show at the Groundlings Theater with a friend of mine who's Taran Killam, who went on to SNL and is a very talented guy. And I was doing a show with him, and he introduced me to a friend of his who had just written a feature film. And I was like, what? Like, it was mind blowing to me. And he was having his movie made by Lionsgate, and oh my God. And he was a writer, and he used to teach writing at a university. And I told him I always wanted to be a writer, but I never went to college, and I don't spell good. And, I was like a little hick child. And he was like, I'll teach you. And so he started emailing me assignments, like go buy J.D. Salinger's, book of short stories and read it and write me about it and stuff. And I just started doing them. And I started writing that way because of this angel.
That's really cool. Yeah, so that's so few people use that example to learn to read what other people have written is a great way to learn. You wind up getting into this place where you want to make sure that you still retain your own voice. I tried writing a screenplay like years and years ago. I wrote it from beginning to end, and I'm proud of that part.
Yes.
And that's where the pride kind of ends. But I read it now and I cringe, but everything from, having the index cards of the scenes and shuffling them around and doing all of that process was just so much fun. And then going through it every time, I really loved it, but it gave me a tremendous respect for when I see something, like I watch a show like yours, or I see a film that I love, and I just, there's nuances in there that I would never have done on my first one. So, like, how much writing did you do before, let's say, this one? But I know you've written on other shows long before that. Like, you've worked for, you worked on Grandfathered, right, with John Stamos. And you wrote some episodes of that, and The Mick, which is another really cool show. So, like, what were you writing? Were you writing sketches at the time? What were you doing?
Well, I was writing a lot of we started writing spec episodes of existing TV shows. Like I wrote a 30 Rock episode and a Modern Family episode.
Which 30 Rock did you? Oh, spec ones. Gotcha.
Oh, spec. Oh my God. No, my God. Yeah, no, I was like, in my early 20s and just trying to figure out what the fuck writing was. And I'd watched so much TV, but you kind of take it for granted. You're like, oh, there's a formula there. And I had read so many books, and I had written a lot of diaries, but there was so much to learn. So I just started writing, and I would write just absolute dog shit and send it to this man who became my mentor, whether he liked it or not. And he would read it and be like, no, but he would give me notes and brutal notes. But I would get better. And then I would write another one, and then I would send it to him, and he'd be like, but
those are tough to read. Those are tough to read. I actually paid somebody like $100 there was a service that they'll, give you notes on the script. And at one point it was like, I'm not even sure if this would be fit for a Hallmark channel. And I was like, oh, this is so bad. Totally right on.
It's important because you're going to learn that way. But thankfully my mentor, whose name is Anthony Tambakis, he's a very successful screenwriter now, but thankfully he gave me the right amount of encouragement with the right amount of honesty. So he was always like, your voice is great, or you're funny, or you're good with dialogue, but your story sense is terrible, So it was enough to keep me going. And I kept going. I just kept writing and writing, and I wrote I wrote a movie that was nonsense. The note on the movie, he was like, every character sounds exactly the same and has the same point of view. And I was like, and that's bad. So I just kept going. And everything I would write, I would learn a new thing and then attribute that to the next thing. And eventually I went to Boom Chicago, which is in Amsterdam. It's like a comedy school in Amsterdam. I lived in Amsterdam for a year and wrote a ton of sketches there. I was performing and writing sketches every day for a year. And in Amsterdam, I wrote more and more pilots and eventually sent them to my now agent. And she got a hold of the two after writing, 10. She got a hold of 11 and 12 and was like, these are good. And then I flew back to LA and she started representing me. And I started going out for staffing on other people's shows.
And so when you first get that, I mean, there's a nerve-wracking moment, right? Your first writing gig, you walk in, and from what I've heard about writers' rooms, it's not necessarily a fun environment because everybody's really fighting to get their ideas in. I mean, maybe more so with we had Jay Moore on, who was part of Saturday Night Live for a while. And he said that, that it beat him down, like going to the writer's room and trying to write. It may not be as aggressive as the SNL writers' room, but it's got to be intimidating. It's your first time. Like you have to almost go in there and just fake it till you make it to a point.
Yeah, definitely. And the good SNL sounds like a whole different beast that for people that are tougher than me. But it's writers' rooms are definitely tricky, and you're usually one of 3 women, and there's 14 men. So it's an interesting environment. But I feel like I got lucky in a sense that I hear stories about, the brutal competition between the writers and everyone's trying to, I thankfully every writer's room I've worked on, the writers all got along really well, and supported each other. And there wasn't that toxic competition thing going on. But it's definitely still absolutely terrifying. And even now when I go write on a show last year, I wrote on a show for a couple of weeks for a friend of mine because it was filming in India. And I was like, I want to go to India. And even then, day one, you show up and you're like, I'm speaking, and it's always scary. Maybe someday it won't be, but I feel like I did get lucky in the rooms that I was in.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, you earn that too. So if you do a good job and they respect your work, then it makes it a lot easier too, which I'm sure is part of it. And then you get, as if it's not bad enough, then you get you notice you can take a little peek into my psyche, how I think everything is bad, how an opportunity is bad. But then the next thing that comes along is then you are picked to write your own episode, right? You become the writer of an episode.
Yeah, well, it's kind of a lie. I mean, everybody writes everything together. You break story in a group and you usually break it in such detail that when you go off to write the outline, you're more or less transcribing what was on the board. And then when that outline comes back to the group and the group goes through the outline, and then you're more or less going off to transcribe the outline to a script. So it's always funny to me when people will say oh, well, that episode's really good because it was written by that person. And a lot of the times it's well, no, everyone writes every episode. I know that's not true for every show. But that's, in my experience, it's always been a gangbang, for lack of a better term. But it is an honor to have your name on something. And it is very exciting to have your name on something. And, and then you get to go to set, and then you get to feel very important, in your writer's chair.
So you only get to go to set if you're the one that was credited with writing the episode?
Typically, sometimes people, there'll be just a writer who lives on set, and you'll see him at the beginning of the season, and he's very handsome, and it's usually a he. He's very handsome and looks great, and then you'll see him at the end of the season, and he has a full beard, and he's gained 30 pounds, and he's like, help me. But most of the time, on most shows, it's just the writer whose name is on it that will be down there, maybe with the showrunner and the director.
Mm-hmm. So, all right. So now you take that experience, you write Florida Girls. That's only the beginning. I mean, getting it from the idea to the screen. How does that happen? What's that process? Where do you first get a break that somebody even looks at it? And then how do you not get too excited for every single step that it starts to take throughout that process?
Yeah, not getting excited is the name of the game, I think, in this business. The non-reaction, like the more you can like meditate and get to a place where non-reaction becomes your default is like, it's the absolute secret. Because, you know, non-reaction when something bad happens, because it's all going to work out fine. And then non-reaction when something good happens, because it's all going to go away, is what I've learned. But with Florida Girls, I wrote that script. I didn't pitch it or anything. I just wrote it for free for myself because I wanted just to be able to show like what I was trying to do, because it's not like, you know, it's a little bit raunchy and it's cable-y, and you know, I didn't want to scare anybody away, but I wanted them to know what it was going to be. So I wrote it. And then we went very non-traditional with it because I didn't want to pitch it to networks, and I didn't want a lot of involvement and a lot of them trying to be like, well, what if they're not, you know, this way? What if they're really great at their jobs or whatever the notes would be? So I tried to just go a different way. And we sent it to a production company called Jax Media, who does Broad City and Search Party and some of my favorite comedies of the past few years. And they have a model where they will fund your pilot to film it. And you can film it the way you want to make it. And they won't give you a bunch of notes. They won't try to water it down. And then you'll take that filmed pilot and shop around to networks. So that's what we did, is that Jax read the script, and the owner of Jax is from Tampa. So he was immediately like making that, like he was like, I know these girls were making this. And they were amazing. And they stepped in and they paid for the pilot presentation to be filmed, which was also helpful because I wanted to act in it. And I had been primarily writing over the past few years. And so I knew it would be a little bit of a hurdle to be like, I'm also want to star in it. What?
Sylvester Stallone and Rocky.
Yeah, Rocky.
A little bit.
He wouldn't let him.
Sylvester Stallone, yes.
You are.
So they did the presentation, and then we took that presentation and shopped it around, and a few networks were like, we want to recast it. We want to, you know, we have some notes about, you know, we want to get rid of her sort of hero's journey, and we want to just make it like fun in Florida, you know, like sketches. And I didn't want to do that. I really wanted to keep the emotional side of it. And I also really didn't want to cast like names in it, you know, because the network was like, we want to take a crack casting names. And I just didn't want to. I just wanted it to be what it was, which was kind of this like ragtag little show with people that you didn't necessarily know who they were before you watched it. So you could watch it and be like, oh, I'm watching these girls, you know, I'm not watching like Scarlett Johansson, not that we would have gotten Scarlett Johansson, but I'm not watching Scarlett Johansson pretend to be trashy. I'm actually watching these girls, you know? And so Pop TV came in and was like, you can do this exactly how you want to do it. Wow. And we were nervous because, you know, Pop is small and all of that, but we had Schitt's Creek and we were like, who knows, you know? Yeah. So we decided to go with Pop, and that's how it ended up there.
And whose idea was like the editing and adding the music and everything? Was that Jax or was that you from the beginning?
That was me, because I really wanted it to feel like I
love how it's cut.
Thank you so much. My husband, my now husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, we met on Grandfathered, actually. He's been a writer for a long time. He was with me every step of the way during this. Like, he was an EP on the show. And we both were like, the way we would describe it is like, we wanted to feel like a 22-minute music video with like jokes and story. But we really wanted it to feel like, to have that like hip hop Southern vibe to it. But yeah, that was a goal of ours. So thank you.
It's funny. I have, Rob turned me onto the show. I didn't hear of it. And then I started watching, and in my teenage years, my friend's dad got transferred to Tampa. So it's like, it just hit home, because it's like, I mean, I grew up going to Ybor City before we were old enough to drink. And like, we would be told like, Linda Hogan's at the Publix in Clearwater. Yeah. So we would like go hang out at the deli so we could maybe see Linda Hogan.
Oh yeah.
It's just such a unique area there that no one knows about.
I know, it's very unique, and there's weird things about it. Like Hulk Hogan lives there. It's in the news. Like Casey Anthony just had her very public trial, that horrible story in Clearwater for some reason. Like there's Terry Schiavo was in Clearwater. Like it just has all these random stories in our small little town.
And so you take this now, Pop TV picks it up. You want to talk about turning up pressure. Now you have your own show. You've created your own show from scratch. And so how many do you write the entire season before you start, or is it kind of flowing along as it goes? And then you have to find the people, which the casting has to be talked about here too, because everyone in this, and you mentioned earlier that when you wrote scripts in the beginning that every character seemed like you. You all had this. You're almost. They're all the same. Your character creation on these four,
I love it.
Could not only have been so incredibly unique, but in addition to that, the people you've got to play them were just excellent. I mean,
Patty Guggenheim, like she just
totally.
In that one episode where you have to give her good quality, you're trying to, tell her why she's not like her mom, but there's just nothing. I was dying.
That was so fun to film. That was so hard to film. Patty and I broke over and over and over again because she was just staring at me, waiting for me to list good qualities about her. It was amazing. She's amazing. Yeah, she's amazing. They're all so amazing. Yeah. I mean, we got so lucky with them. We took a long time to find them. And Lacey Mosley, who plays Jayla, I knew her from UCB, and I was her improv coach, and I watched her, and I was like, this bitch is a star. Like, I was like, the moment I watched her perform, I was like, I have to put her in something, like, because I knew the whole world was going to be like, snatch her up,
Right.
And
she describes herself. I saw her in an interview where she says, my character is champagne taste with a malt liquor budget. It's so good.
Hilarious. Lacey's hilarious. Like she's her own content creator, and she has a podcast called Scam Goddess Pod, which is like,
I'll have to watch it.
Oh, it's great. It's becoming more and more popular, and she is fucking amazing on it. But yeah, no, we got really, really lucky with all three of them. And they are so unique, and the characters' points of view are they're all kind of opposing, which made it so fun to write. Because we could say things that we just believed, and then somebody could argue with it, but we could at least say it, Right. And yeah, we were lucky in that we got to write all 10 before we shot, which network TV doesn't allow you to do. That's why everyone was insane when they have a network show to deal with, because you have to be writing it on set and all those other things. So we were able to write all 10 and then move to Savannah where we filmed, and then go into production mode when you have all your scripts, which is a wonderful gift. But yeah, no, we we really loved our cast.
Well, the 4 girls are awesome. And then the outside cast is good too, like these weird men that you have in there. I mean, it's like you don't want to turn away. It's so good and addicting.
They're so wonderful. Yeah, we had our casting director in Atlanta was amazing, and he would find us these beautiful, like these men that just looked so much like they were from the area. We really wanted to make sure that nobody looked like they were an extra in LA. And so, yeah, we really were able to like round out the show with very interesting people.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't touch on her, but Melanie as well. I mean, talk about like someone that can make you laugh without even saying a word.
Yeah, her facial expressions.
Oh my God.
And Melanie comes from Broadway. Like Melanie is like an actor. Like she went to, I don't remember what school, but some crazy university for act. She has a theater degree. She's a singer, powerhouse singer. And I don't know if she knew how funny she was before this. I don't know if she fully knew, or even if she still knows how funny she is, because it's crazy how funny she is. And she came into audition. So we had been looking for Caitlin for a long time, because we really wanted to find someone who was like a force of nature, but
right.
also like extreme confidence, and it's hard to find in LA because everyone's like, actresses are so like sort of demure, and we were trying to find someone who would just like punch you in the face with their presence. And Melanie came into the audition after we had spent, I think at that point it had been a year basically looking for this person. And Melanie came into the audition, and like stood up on a chair or something. I don't know what she did. She was so incredible. Immediately, Caitlin, she left the room and I fell on the floor. I fell out of my chair. I was like, we found her. And we all hugged. All the EPs hugged. We were like, we found her. We were so happy. Yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah. So, so all of this crew, like you can tell, you mentioned earlier that you're all really good friends. You can really tell, like just as people, that you're good friends too. And that, it plays a big part in it, because as you're going through it and film, I don't know, do you film them sequentially or?
No, all filmed out of order, all over the place. It was very, being reminded, like right now you're about to walk into this, and you're like, okay. It was very intense, on a low budget, tight schedule. Yeah, but it does. People do say, like, as the show progresses, the people comment a lot how the show progresses. It feels like we're getting closer and stuff, but it is all shot out of order.
So, as a fan of Arrested Development, as a fan of Freaks and Geeks, I know what it's like to have a show that I love pulled out from under you. And the Florida Girls is almost worse, because the show was renewed, and I was so happy to hear it was renewed. So what happened? The network was sold, and then they just flipped and just said, no, you're not renewed, and took it away?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It was quite unprecedented. I know when we aired, the critical response to the show was so positive, and I hadn't even given myself time to consider what the critical response would be. So it was this incredible surprise. And the New York Times had an article that was like, Florida Girls is another reason to find Pop TV. And that was the name of the article. So everybody on our end was like, oh, we just got a second season. Like Pop TV is not going to cancel the show that the New York Times just said as a reason to find their network. Right. And so it was like, it felt very much like a given. And then the show did well for their network viewers wise. And so we were like, great. And Pop TV picked us up, and it was very smooth and easy. And we wrote 10 episodes, that I just love with my whole heart. And we table read them. Oh my God. We table read them in LA with the whole cast, and it was just marvelous. And we were so excited. And we went to Savannah and we started pre-production, and we were 4 days away from filming. And we knew Viacom was buying Pop, because we knew they were buying CBS. So they were going to inherit all of CBS's networks. But they canceled every Pop show. They pulled every Pop show that had been renewed and, paid for. Like the actors were being paid, the writing had already commenced, and we were in pre-production. So a lot of money had already gone into this second season, and they canceled everything. I think as like a show to the shareholders to be like, we're saving money. So they just like the slate clean of all our shows. And so we found out, my manager called me like 10:30 at night and was like, hey, so he's like, I've never done anything like this or heard of anything like this in my entire career, but you guys don't have a network anymore. And I was like, again, because I've learned to not react to anything, I was like, okay, well, like, let us know if we're going to work tomorrow or not. And they were in Lionsgate, who is our studio, was like, yes, definitely keep going to work, because we're just going to find you a new home. And so then everybody got kind of excited, because we were like, oh, what if we end up on a network with a bigger built-in audience? That could be great. And we just kept moving through pre-production, and the actors were coming, and we were just going to film. And then Trump declared a national emergency because of COVID. I know. And then it was like very clear we had to shut down production. And then we had some networks that were interested in buying the show. And one network went even as far as to put an offer in for the show and was like, we're just going to buy it. And they were like, oh, we'll air the first season on our app, and then we'll air the second season, just live on our network. And we were stoked. And then with COVID, it was like, no, they were like, no, every network was like, never mind, we're not buying anything. Hollywood's done forever. And that was the mentality for the first couple months of COVID. Was like, everyone was terrified. Nobody was pitching anything. Everybody was so scared. And then so many shows started to get canceled, also because of COVID. So we were like, oh, this is not happening. And here we are.
So what happens now to the 10 episodes that you wrote? Like, even are you going to try to do anything with it? I mean, it's that typical thing when a show gets canceled, everybody's like, well, what about Netflix? Like, you don't think about that. But have you thought about finding a way to I mean, it's unfortunate because once everybody separates and the crew separates, it's a full undertaking to get everything back together again.
Yeah.
So, I mean, are you already like in your head moving on to another project, or are you doing that and still trying to see if you can get it saved somehow?
No, I've buried it and given it a funeral in my heart. I know, and just only because I have had to emotionally just be like, okay. But if this industry, especially television, has become so unpredictable that it would not shock me to get a phone call in 3 months that's like, this network wants to buy the whole thing, and the cast happens to be available, and you guys are going. I wouldn't be shocked at that. But I have no idea. So I just have had to, let it go. Lionsgate still owns it. I'm on a deal at Lionsgate. They would definitely still want to make it. Lionsgate really championed it and really tried to find a home for it. So it's not like it's impossible. But I'm not like vision boarding it because I just had to move on from it emotionally. So yeah. But the girls and I are all still very close and like love each other. And every time we talk, we're like, oh, we didn't get to do that one episode about, the free clinic.
I want the scripts.
Yeah.
You could put watermarks on them.
Yeah. I mean, we had a lot of fun. No, I would absolutely be thrilled if we got to do it again. But no, I've had to just move on to other stuff for my heart.
Yeah, it makes sense. So I know you can't really talk about what you're working on now, but I guess, are you using this time to focus on what you want to do next?
Yeah. So I wrote a feature that was just on the blacklist. I found out a couple weeks ago, which was amazing, very exciting thing. And that was my first feature. So we're trying to find ways to get that made and financed and all of that. And we're out to actors with that, and we're in like very baby stages. And then I'm just working with Lionsgate on TV stuff because I want to deal with them for the rest of the year, and just sort of the little beginnings of different TV stuff for Lionsgate. And I'm writing a book. What?
Very, very cool.
Yeah.
Is it an autobiography?
It is. Yeah. It's a sort of, it's a sort of sad, funny book about, my childhood, that I'm just writing, and I just got a book agent, and I'm like, oh my God, what is this world? So I'm just learning about this stuff now.
That's great. Like to just put yourself into anything that you want to do. Like, it's instead of just continuing to work on film and TV, to want to go and try a book and write one too. That's awesome to be able to do all of those different things,
Thank you. I just like writing so much. I think that's something I've learned from quarantine is because can't do anything else or go anywhere else. I've just been writing and it's sort of rekindled my love of writing. And when you write on other people's shows, you do so little actual writing. You're talking more, you're in a room and you're talking and you're sharing ideas, but you're not sitting down and writing. And so I think I've sort of fallen back in love with just like writing this year.
I was doing some research on you, and I saw that you said like the best ideas come to you before you're going to sleep. So are you like in bed with your notebook? Is that how it works?
No, what happens is it's weird. I forget every time, and I'm tortured by insomnia, and I'll sleep normal for a couple of months, and then insomnia will hit me so badly, and I toss and turn, and I'm so frustrated, and then I'm like, oh, I need to like get up and write something down, and then I do, and stuff comes to me, and then I write it, and then I can fall asleep right away. But it is this weird, like it's sort of tied into insomnia. It's like the gods of ideas are like bothering me before I fall asleep, and I'm like, go away. And then I'm like, wait, no, this is really good.
This could be a good one.
Yeah. Stay with me, help me. But yeah, I tend to do that.
Yeah, and one of the things I just wanted to talk to you about just a little bit, and I've always been fascinated with this. Lori hears me talk about it all the time because it's something I always wanted to do, which is improv. We've had some of our guests before all have come from that world. Like we had Jim O'Hare from Parks and Rec, he came from that world, and Matt Walsh from VEP came from that world, and they speak fondly of it. And you can tell in watching the show that you definitely do have a lot of improv background, like the ability to, and I gotta imagine it helps you write too.
Yeah.
So how early on did you get into that?
I got into that 10 years ago, my 10-year anniversary with improv. When I was I was 24 when I first started taking classes. And then, just like fell hard in love. I started doing improv at other places when I first moved to LA when I was 20, but I was like, sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not. And no one's telling me how to make it good, So you're just getting on stage and kind of being like, I don't know this. And sometimes it's terrible. And at UCB, they have such a learnable formula that you can take into your body and then know that if something's not working, you know how to get yourself out of it, or you know how to keep it going, or just so many amazing tools. And so I started taking classes at UCB and watching like As Cat and some of those shows where I was like, just never laughed more in my life, and was so enamored with the magic of it, of what Matt Walsh and all those people are capable of. And so, I started taking classes and then auditioning and for Herald Night and those things. And just fell so in love with it. And I've been doing it for 10 years. I'm on a team at UCB called Outside Dog that we've been a team for, I don't know, it feels like decades, but probably not that long, maybe like 5 years. And then I just joined As Cat, which was this incredible dream come true to be performing with those people, and also absolutely terrifying. But I just joined As Cat right before the pandemic hit. I was like so excited to be doing those shows, but they're on a temporary hiatus.
Aw.
Yeah, even UCB classes, which if there's any time that I would be able to feasibly do it, would be now, because they are doing them online. Although that's just, I know it's not the same, but I do see that they're offering the classes online. And there's a couple of times I was like, you know what? Maybe this is the time to do it. What the hell?
Oh God, I think everyone should do it. It's just so good for you. Especially if you're like a person who likes to be in control, which I definitely am and was. It's really good for you to just be on a stage and have absolutely no control over anything that goes on. I think it's good for your mental disorder.
That might not be good for me.
Yeah.
That might not be good for me at all. But you can definitely tell like how that could help writing and acting and pretty much everything. Like you probably pull a little bit of it every single time you do anything.
Absolutely. And even in a meeting, like just learning how to speak on your feet and think on your feet. It's so helpful. And it helped me comedically so much, because I didn't grow up as a comedy nerd. I wasn't the kid who everyone was like, you're so funny. Like that wasn't, so it definitely helped me, made me funnier and understand comedy more. And I watched thousands of hours of improv and hours of just the funny. I used to intern at the theater in exchange for free classes. Oh, cool. And so I would pick up trash and clean the toilets and stuff. And I would watch Sarah Silverman. I interned on the stand-up comedy night, but I would just watch hours and hours of like Zach Galifianakis and Sarah Silverman and all these people who were so just in their bones funny. And it helps. It definitely helps your own timing and helps you figure out your own voice from watching other people, weirdly.
And reading the room probably too.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And meeting people, not gross, like networking Hollywood kind of way, but you get to meet people that, for me, like, because I didn't go to college, I never had that experience of like, oh, these are my people feeling. But I definitely, UCB and writers' rooms, comedy people, I started to feel like, oh, like this is my group. And UCB was very instrumental in that.
There's something you said earlier about one of the notes you got from Florida Girls that I made a mental note. I didn't want to derail. Was one of the notes, did you say, what if everyone was really good at their jobs? Was that really on the show?
That's like a common, it's a common thing with broadcast networks, is that they want people to be like good at stuff and not have flaws. And when you're writing comedy, those two things can't exist, and especially women. On every show, I think almost every show, the Mick was an exception, right? The Mick was allowed to be this kind of trashy piece of shit, and it was wonderful. But a lot of shows that I've written on, the woman character has to have no flaws, and then she's not funny because she doesn't make mistakes, and she doesn't say outrageous things like Michael Scott, and she didn't, and
like Pam is like, the voice of reason there in The Office.
Right. And I don't know, I never worked on The Office, so I don't know what their rule was with women, but so many networks, the notes that I've heard are just like, there was a show that I worked on, I won't say which, but there was a female character who was a lead, and we stayed up till midnight in the writer's room trying to give her some kind of interesting flaw, to the point where we were like, what if she's allergic to gluten? Like what if anything? What if anything? And then we came up with like, okay, let's just say she's really pretty. She's already been cast. She's gorgeous, right? She's TV gorgeous. She's really pretty. She's obviously charming. She has all these qualities. So what can we find about her that we could make up as a flaw? And we were like, what if people just don't like her? Like she tries really hard. She's really sweet. She's really pretty, but she just rubs people wrong, and they just don't like her. And she doesn't have friends, and she's kind of a loner, right? And so we presented this to the network to be like, hey, this is what we're thinking for this character, so we can give her something to strive for, something to, something to relate to her with.
Right.
And they were like, what if instead she's really popular?
Exact opposite.
Yeah. What if she's really popular and makes friends really easily? And we were like, okay. So it is something that we run into a lot of the time with women, but even with men, like they want to be really good at their jobs. That's a common thing. I don't know. It takes comedy out of it for sure.
It's Kevin Smith, the director. He does these spoken words where he tells stories about Hollywood, and that's one of my favorite things that he does, because he's very, very honest about that. And he's telling these stories about how he goes to pitch these ideas, and there's an executive lying on a couch, not even looking at him, and he starts pitching an idea that is not even science fiction, and the guy's like, "What if there are giant mechanical spiders?"
Oh yeah, I know this story.
Right. So, you know what I mean? Like it's crazy that.
Well, that guy went on to do Wild Wild West.
Wild West, yeah, and that's
it's just so good. It's such a good story. It's so good. Yeah. No, yeah. It's alarming out there. It's alarming, and it's not everywhere. We got so lucky. Pop was amazing. Their notes were like helpful and small, and Lionsgate's been amazing. So you can get lucky, or you can just be in a situation where for whatever reason they trust you, and they just like let you be. And I think that's why like so many great shows come from these like veterans of television who like the networks are too scared to say to them like, what if she's popular, and then the veterans are like, no. And so I do think that like it helps that if you have that level of trust where they're not like getting in there and putting in their 2 cents all the time. But it definitely is a strange experience. The feedback is strange.
Yeah. I'm trying to think, Lori, who is the person that said the director said to him before they started that they're going to try to fuck with you, and no matter what they do, we have to be on the same page. Was that Tim Robbins? I think I'm trying to remember, but
I think it was Tim
Robbins. The director sat him down and said, actually, yes, Robert Altman sat down with Tim Robbins and asked him to do the player, and he said, I just have one rule. The studio is going to try to fuck with you. They're going to come in.
Oh, right.
They're going to fuck with you. And when they do, you tell me, and we're not going to let it happen. And he's like, I don't think that's going to happen. And like 2 days in, they started trying to fuck with him right away. So it's just, I hate those stories because, it's almost like they want the money to talk. And, instead of, prime example is canceling Florida Girls just to show that they save money when it's critically acclaimed. And, it comes from a network that, while I don't think they had a part in creating Schitt's Creek, like they're the ones that took a chance on it to bring it here.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, they were really, it was interesting. It seemed like Pop was going to do some interesting stuff. I know a couple of friends of mine were developing comedies over there that were very like interesting and edgy, and are no longer obviously doing that, but they were definitely like wanting to take risks. And the president of the network had this like very strong belief that you just like find creative people that you trust and then get out of their way. And he said that to me early on, and I was like, we'll see, buddy. And then he totally did. Like they would be scared, they'd be like, I don't know if we can do this, and we'd be like, just let us do it. And they'd be like, they'd ultimately let us, do what we wanted to do. So yeah, I'm very, very thankful to them for that experience.
Well, we are very thankful to you for the show and for bringing us so many laughs. And like I said, we can't wait to see what you have next, the book and whatever else you're working on.
Yay!
Yeah, we're really big fans.
Yeah, beginning story, not an ending story. By all means. So, and I still want to read those 10 scripts.
I know.
Well, thank you guys so much. This is so lovely, and your podcast is so lovely. I really enjoyed listening to Matthew McConaughey.
He was a joke. We did too. It was like it was cool. And he's just kind of sat there. It's just leaning out.
He's like the ultimate cool guy.
Just the coolest guy in the world. He's going to be 80 years old, and I'm going to be like, man, you're cooler than me. Yeah.
I watch it back, and when I watch it back, I'm like, man, I'm like a different species compared to this guy. Totally different species.
It's like cruel that we're all considered human. Yeah.
right. So hang on one second, Laura. I'm just going to wrap this up, but I wanted to talk to you quick afterwards. Once again, please check out Florida Girls. It's on streaming services. Is that on Netflix right now, Laura?
It's on iTunes.
It's on Amazon.
Yeah, you can buy it. You can buy episodes right now.
Yeah, so you can get it on iTunes. It's on Amazon as well. I can't stress enough how funny of a show it is. And
you can buy the whole season on Amazon for like $11, which I did.
Yeah,
fucking do it, guys. Just do it. I'll Venmo you.
It's so good. It's really good. I mean, and if you're not familiar with this area of the country, it is such a comedic area of the country that, like, I mean, I spent so much of my youth there. I just love seeing it on the screen.
And you can also follow Laura on Instagram, Laura Chinn with 4 N's, because 4 is better than 2. So we have to find who the 2N Chin is and make sure.
I know. I get tagged in her photos sometimes. Yeah.
But really, seriously, everybody should check it out. It's a great show. Laura, thank you so much for joining us. We had a great time.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you for watching The Whole. I am Rob Sprance.
I'm Laura Levine.
Later.